In this lesson, we're going to take a look at secondary animation or secondary actions. And right from the offset, before we even look at any examples, because we have the word secondary there, it makes us then think, well, what is the primary animation or the primary actions? Secondary animation or secondary actions, and let's roll with actions henceforth, really are the things that are happening secondarily to the primary action of the pose. And so here we have two gestural examples of a character running and a character kind of standing carrying a case. And in this instance, we can see here that the primary directionality of each of these, as indicated by a line of action, has got a particular kind of angle to it, a particular kind of tilt, or a particular kind of direction of action in the pose. Now, of course, the character running is doing something way more active than the character just standing still. Yet at the same time, we can use this theory to enhance both of them. A common mistake is for people to draw the secondary elements doing nothing. So here's our character running. We've got the hair in a static position, the shirt in a static position, and the pants are really in a static position. There is no mind paid toward perhaps these elements are moving as a secondary result of the primary force, right? And similarly here in the static character, well, we just assume that because the character is static, everything else should be static too, or the character is standing still, so perhaps everything else is very much still. And so the character's hair here is just really straight down, the scarf is straight down, the dress is straight down, and the case is very much parallel. However, a better way to approach this would then be to say, well, what secondary things could be happening as a result of the primary force? So here in the runner, we've got the hair now waving back, and we've got the shirt flicking up back as well, and the pants are now kind of flailing in the wind a little bit. And it adds an immense amount of energy and dynamism and flow to the piece to have secondary actions taking place. Similarly, in the character that is standing still, it's almost as if we got a snapshot of her in real life. Things are moving, and we just paused that movement in our drawing. The hair is tilted slightly back, and her scarf is flailing forwards a little bit. Her skirt is at more of a dynamic angle and perhaps is affected a little bit by the wind. And we've adjusted the case angle as well, perhaps as a result of how she's balancing the weight in her body. So really, secondary actions are those actions that are secondary to the primary action that is happening in the entire form. The character is punching, a character is fighting or doing a sport or running. Even if they're standing in a particular way, we will always want to ask ourselves, what are the secondary actions? Or have I drawn in any secondary actions? Am I drawing things that could have movement, that could have dynamism in a static way? This is extremely important to remember in your pieces, because having secondary elements that are static can really kill all the work you've put into making the primary action dynamic. As a practical example of secondary actions in a final piece, here we have this blood elf type character who is casting a spell. The spell is not in this particular drawing because it's in fact painted in afterwards, but nevertheless there is a magic spell sort of happening around this area. And as a result of the force of that spell, we have the character's hair blowing back as a secondary action happening in the piece. Her hair is blowing back. But at the same time, she's also moving forward. She's running forward here. So we can see her leg, her one leg down, and her other leg coming forward. And with the other leg coming forward as well, we have a secondary action happening in her dress elements here. In addition, because her body's in movement, when we look at her jewelry, her earrings are swaying and flailing back. All right? And so are these little jewels on her neck. They're sort of at a slight angle. Nothing is really static. And here we see these jewels as well flailing back as the character moves. So there are quite a few elements of secondary actions happening in this particular piece. And we even have some secondary actions happening from some unknown source. We have rocks flying in the background, though that's not really related to the character, but nevertheless it's still an example of secondary actions occurring here in the dress as well. So hopefully you have a very clear idea of how valuable and useful implementing secondary actions into your work is, And really, you want to include them. You don't want to leave them out. There's something that can really enhance your work. So why would you leave it out? So as we move forward in the course, be very aware of secondary actions and be sure to implement them wherever you need to. I'll see you in the next lesson.